Hello and welcome back, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful start to your day here. I know I sure am. I've had a pretty good start to my week here now that we have made it to Wednesday. But we have a lot to talk about in terms of weather today, so I'll give you a quick overview before we get into it. First, we're going to start by looking at the current hazards and satellite imagery. Then we're going to transition into the first storm that's going to move through the country, that has, I guess, already begun moving through the country, that will then impact eastern areas going into the next couple of days and into your New Year's Eve. And then we're going to discuss an even more powerful system that is going to move through a lot of the same areas going into the first couple days of 2023. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that. A lot to discuss and a lot of areas that will be impacted in a pretty big way by these two systems. But with all that, let's go ahead and get right into it. So looking at satellites so far, as you can see, pretty active weather is pretty well confined to the central areas of the country as well as the northern stretches here into the Great Lakes, but relatively quiet here along the southeastern area, as well as really even the northeast with a little bit more of unsettled weather moving in through the Great Lakes into New York State. But we've also had a bit of a break out west after that very powerful system moved through yesterday, bringing a ton of rain. But for those areas and pretty much everyone on the map, don't let your guard down because if you're in a lull right now, that will quickly change as we go into the later parts of this week. So we'll go ahead and start by looking at our hazards real quick. We have some wind advisories and high wind warnings here into the Texas Panhandle through central Oklahoma and even into parts of northwestern Arkansas and southwestern Missouri. So in those areas, you can expect some higher winds today. Also, still some mountain snow ongoing here into the southwestern part of the Rocky Mountains, and even a little bit here into portions of Montana, Idaho, and then even more ongoing here through the Cascades and into Northern California, as well as flood advisories in sections of California, as we've already had so much rain in those areas and more to move through later on into this week. So we've had a pretty warm day here, considering how cold it's been recently here across a good chunk of the country. Even 70s here along the Gulf Coast, but we've already made it up to 50s at about the 2 o'clock hour here across a big section of the Carolinas, Georgia, even up into Tennessee and areas of Kentucky getting into the 50s today. So that's a nice little warm up, a nice change compared to what we've had to deal with the past couple of days. So we're going to go ahead and run you through this first system that is currently moving through, and we're going to talk about all the hazards that are coming with that, and then we're going to transition into the next system moving through right during New Year's, and all of the other components that that system will bring. So let's go ahead and start with the one ongoing right now. Again, this is the current storm we're dealing with as it has moved through the Rockies, and this is the kind of, I guess, northern section of that system. If you looked at radar yesterday, it almost looked like a hurricane was coming on shore here into Washington and Oregon. Of course, it wasn't. It was just a mid-latitude cyclone, but this is what is left of that now moving across the northern plains. This is kind of the southern branch of that that will transition into a pretty big rainmaker here across the east. But as of right now, of course, like we talked about, still some mountain snow ongoing from the leftovers of that powerful system that was moving through the west coast yesterday. But let's go ahead and bring this up in time a little bit. Go into your Thursday morning. Could see some snow out here into sections of Kansas and Nebraska. Not a huge event, but could see a couple of inches accumulate in those areas as you still have enough cold air to work with, as this low pressure is going to help to bring down some more cold air from Canada. Go ahead and move this even further ahead into time now. And as you'll see, going into your Thursday afternoon and evening, that bit of snow will work its way up through sections of Minnesota, maybe Minneapolis getting a quick couple inches of snow from that. But on the southern side of it here, we see rain building in to sections of the Gulf Coast here from Galveston over through Louisiana. And that is going to eventually spread further northward and eastward, kind of riding up the Mississippi River here, especially going into your Friday morning here and into Friday afternoon. Pretty widespread rain here across the Mississippi, Alabama regions, and even up into Arkansas, and kind of working its way up the Mississippi into sections of southern Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. So that's Friday afternoon. Still pretty dry here in sections of the Northeast and further eastern sections of the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic. But that will change once we go into Friday night and into your New Year's Eve. So this is New Year's Eve, I guess mid-morning time frame, around 10 o'clock ish. That heavy rain then begins to move into sections of the Carolinas and Georgia here, as well as pretty moderate rainfall moving in with the actual low itself here into sections of the Ohio River Valley. So if you're dry on Thursday, that will change. Well, excuse me, if you're dry on Thursday and Friday, that will change going into your Saturday. With some, again, pretty heavy rainfall even here into sections of the Carolinas. I would expect southwestern mountains of North Carolina, areas like Oconee County, South Carolina, Toccoa, Georgia, to get some enhanced rainfall there due to elevation, as all of this moisture gets backed up against the Appalachian Mountains here. It kind of helps to wring it out. So expect some heavier rainfall in those regions. But this will eventually work its way out, going through, I guess, your midnight time frame whenever you're watching the ball drop on Saturday night. Pretty likely to see a pretty wet Times Square as that is ongoing. So if you're planning on going to that, make sure you wear, I guess, a raincoat and bring an umbrella. I don't think it'll be a complete washout, but definitely on and off showers at the least. But in areas that had seen rain a little earlier in the week, this will clear out actually going into your New Year's Day. I guess in kind of poetic fashion, you might even see the sun on New Year's Day after a pretty rainy New Year's Eve. But that system will then begin to work through the Northeast on New Year's Day before eventually clearing out, and maybe even a little bit of back and snow in extreme northern areas of New England going into Monday the 2nd. So that's our first system that we're working with here. And with that, one hazard is going to come tomorrow with a slight chance of severe weather. I should say marginal chance of severe weather here in the Arklatex region. Nothing groundbreaking here, but chance of isolated strong winds and maybe even a quick spin-up tornado in this area. The ingredients don't look off the charts, but definitely enough there that the Storm Prediction Center felt the need to go ahead and issue this risk for tomorrow. So that'll be for tomorrow afternoon throughout those regions. And with this first system also is going to come some rainfall. So this is going out to Monday, so the 2nd of January. This is the rain that the first system is going to bring. So as you can see here throughout the southeast, pretty good bet to see 1 to 3 inches in most areas. Again, I think some areas here in the southwestern or just the southern section of the Appalachian Mountains could see some elevation-driven higher amounts, and maybe even areas in the Florida Panhandle exceeding 3 inches with just a little bit of extra Gulf flow. But with the low itself, again, higher rainfall kind of here through the Ohio River Valley, around 1 inch. Lighter totals as you get into sections of the northern mid-Atlantic and into New England, where the rain will be a little bit more scattered and not so widespread with this first system. All right, so that's the first system. I think we've covered just about all the bases there with that one. We'll now go ahead and move into the second system that is going to begin to move into the West Coast as kind of the first system is getting going in the Southeast. So this will begin really within the next 12 to 24 hours in California. And I'm not going to touch too much on this just because I specialize a little bit more in areas east of the Rockies, but I'll give you a quick overview here on the West Coast. Precipitation begins to move in going into tomorrow, and it's really going to be a pretty big repeat of the first system you saw earlier this week. Heavy mountain snow and then heavy rain in the lower elevation regions. So in terms of the exact elevations that will see snowfall, check with your local National Weather Service or local meteorologist. I couldn't really tell you off the top of my head what exact elevations would be the cutoffs here, but if you saw snow earlier this week, it's a safe bet you're going to see the same thing. And the same thing with rainfall, even rain getting as far south as LA and San Diego. So good to see that much needed rainfall there. But as we go into New Year's Day, this is going to then finally work through most of the Rockies. And that's whenever we get the rain to then begin to break out in the same regions that are going to see it this Thursday throughout this general area. So let's go ahead and run you through this. And this system does look to be a lot more potent than the first one. As you can see, we've got a lot stronger low here in the lower 990s. And with that, we may get some pretty organized severe weather through this region. And we'll take a look at that here in a second after we move through this entire system. But this is going into, let me back this up a little bit. This is Monday morning, some snow breaking out in areas that are going to see it again earlier this week. Sections of far northwestern Kansas, a good chunk of Nebraska as this low pressure gets going. And then going into Monday afternoon, get some storms to develop here again into the Arklatex regions and up the Mississippi River towards the St. Louis area, point southward towards Paducah and Memphis. And some of these storms could become strong. And like I said, we'll take a look at that here in a second. But that widespread rain and severe weather will then begin to work its way eastbound. This is Tuesday night. Rain becoming pretty widespread throughout the Ohio and Mississippi river valleys and Tennessee River Valley, and even working its way potentially into the Carolinas. Going into your Tuesday afternoon, this system really gets cranking here. As you can see, a big swath of rain, as this is a very organized low pressure system, and even the chance for some pretty impressive winter storm conditions with this low pressure as it works its way through sections of Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, and even parts of the Dakotas. So as we get into Tuesday afternoon here, that rain is going to spread further east into sections of New England. And even here, sections of Michigan seeing heavy rainfall with maybe some snow into the UP of Michigan. This is still pretty far out. We're still looking at about a week out here, so the location and timing of this is going to change, but this is the overall, I guess, synoptic details that we are likely going to be looking at. As we go into next Wednesday, still some rain and maybe even another low pressure forms on the back end of this storm, but areas of New England should clear out going into Wednesday afternoon, with maybe rain continuing as we get kind of locked into this wet pattern throughout the southeast. But conditions should clear up going into the end of next week through most areas. So let's go ahead and look at the hazards that we're looking at with this next system that we're going to be dealing with. So at day 6, the Storm Prediction Center has already outlined an area of concern here in the yellow, running really from sections of Louisiana through Jackson, Mississippi, parts of Alabama, a good chunk of western Tennessee, most of the state of Arkansas, and then the southern fringes of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and western Kentucky. So a lot of those areas already under the gun, Storm Prediction Center is looking at, and we'll look at some of those ingredients now. This is the Euro model we're looking at for these ingredients. And again, this is still about a week out. I mean, as you saw there, 6 days out. So a lot of this is going to change, but this is just the overall synoptic view. As we see, this is going into Sunday afternoon and Sunday night into Monday afternoon, I should say. And you get this really nice warm sector to develop here in these areas as that warm Gulf air gets advected northward up the Mississippi River. And so a lot of these areas are going to see very muggy conditions, especially compared to what we were looking at this time last week as that cold front was moving through. But dew points here into the mid to upper 60s are plenty conducive enough for severe weather, and even 50 degree dew points working their way all the way up potentially into sections of the Midwest, which is very impressive for this time of year. So with that, we're going to get a little bit of instability to work its way in here as well. As you can see, I think instability will be the main limiting factor in the northern area of that slight risk issued by the Storm Prediction Center. But I definitely think here in more of a Dixie Alley area, plenty of instability probably to work with. Although instability is a lot of the times a big question that you have to worry about, and that a week out, that will likely change. Looking at lapse rates here, which if you're unfamiliar with what the lapse rate is, it's kind of just a measure of how unstable the atmosphere is and how easy it is for convection to begin. So kind of the brighter colors you see here, the more unstable the atmosphere is. This is Monday afternoon, going into the afternoon. As you can see, lapse rates are not crazy impressive in this area. You kind of see the, sorry about that, the higher lapse rates are kind of shifted further to the west, but still enough to work with here in these regions, especially when you have some of the wind shear that we will likely be working with here in those areas. So looking at bulk shear of around 50 knots up to 60, maybe even 70 in isolated places. So those are the ingredients that we're going to be working with, and why the Storm Prediction Center has gone ahead and kind of put ahead with that that warning area to look out for going into next Monday. One more thing I'm going to show you with this is the supercell composite. So again, I talked about this yesterday. This is kind of just the ingredients that you have to work with in order to form strong storms. So this is going into Monday afternoon here, and this is now using the GFS. We were using the Euro for the other components. But as you can see, highlighted area here into Louisiana, Arkansas, and then that eventually is going to continue to move to the east into sections of Dixie Alley going into Tuesday and eventually into Wednesday of next week. So nothing off the chart here. Um, I really think if there's an area I would highlight that should really be concerned would be areas on the southern fringe of the of this outlook. I think these general areas have a much higher chance than these areas right now. But we're still a week out, so we have time to continue to fine tune that forecast, and we will. All right, so now let's go ahead and look at the next component of this, which is going to be the heavy rainfall. So this is the total rainfall expected with the first system combined with the second system. So if you remember, a lot of these areas we were looking at 1 to 3 inches with the first system. So subtract that from these totals you see on the screen, and that will give you what will be from the second system, or you can just add them both together and look at what you're looking at with both systems. So I think 4 to 8 inches of rain is a pretty safe bet here into the southeast. Again, some elevation-driven rain potentially in these regions, but some areas could get closer to 9 inches if we do run into some training with some of these storms. And of course, just a ton of moisture out west with that atmospheric river that is continuing to give us this pattern that we have begun to find ourselves in. So again, a lot of this is going to end up being snow in the higher terrain with rain in the lower terrain, but some pretty hefty totals out there out west, but also good because those are areas that definitely need the rain. So I guess to conclude this video, what I want to do is talk about the long range pattern. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter and in comments of different videos talking about how winter is over and all of this stuff now that we've gotten ourselves into this warmer pattern. What I would like to remind everyone is we are still in the first week of winter. So to proclaim that winter is over and winter is dead when we haven't even hit the new year yet is a bit dangerous in my opinion, I guess. So of course, right now we have all of this, I guess, ridging going on in the east with troughing out west, which is really helping to bring those warmer temperatures and rain to the area. So we're going to go ahead and move this in. This is our storm going into the new year. As you can see, with all this troughing out west, we're going to continue to have these storms move into the west coast. But as we get into the long range here, the pattern is going to slowly but surely begin to moderate. And that ridging is going to begin to move a little bit further north, and the troughing out west is going to calm down. So we're likely going to begin to get to a lot more average weather once we get into the middle of January. And another good thing for winter weather lovers across the eastern United States is this is a pretty good time frame to be getting out of a warm pattern. It's much better, in my opinion, to use the warm pattern now going into late December and early January than to use it in the middle of into January. So what I would do if I were a winter weather lover, which I am, is go out, enjoy some of the sun, enjoy the warmer weather, because winter is definitely not over. I can just about guarantee you that. We will have plenty more winter storms to track here across the eastern United States before we're all said and done and move into the spring. But that is all I have for you today. I know this was a bit of a longer video than my last couple, but we have a lot of active weather to talk about, so had to make it a little bit longer. If you enjoyed the video, though, don't be afraid to hit the like button and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. Like I said in the beginning, we have a lot of active weather, and winter is definitely not over. So we have plenty more of that to worry about as we go later on into January. But hope everyone has a great rest of their day, and I will see you all tomorrow.